Electronic arts. 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 If there was ever a name that illustrated a need for some kind of verbal equivalent of social services who come and forcibly take words away if they're being misused, then again, they do mainly go by EA these days, so maybe they quietly changed their name to extruding arseholes so as not to offend reality. My point is, if there was ever a time when artistry was important enough to the company to be eponymous, then that is not a time in which we are currently living. Now they're just all about money and being a dick about things. Perhaps EA now stands for expel all your money from your wallet so that we can have it and then be a dick about it. Yes, I am quite bitter because I had to install Origin to play SimCity. EA's overpriced, I'm going to make my own clubhouse just for all my friends and it's going to have cake in Subutio and it's going to be so much better digital distribution system, and putting that on my computer felt like leaving a child of my own in the Jonestown daycare centre. I felt dirty afterwards. I had to take a Steam bath. That's where you load up Steam and download a bunch of indie games to scrub yourself with.
There are certain creators I can casually put on in the background, enjoy for a few minutes, and then move on from them without fully thinking about them afterwards. And then there are creators like Yahtzee Croshaw, where the second one video ends, I somehow find myself clicking another almost automatically. And I've always found that interesting, because on paper, his videos really shouldn't be as endlessly rewatchable as they are. They're fast, cynical, heavily opinionated, and often so packed with jokes that it feels like half of them fly past before I've ever fully processed the first one. And yet somehow, instead of feeling exhausting, it creates the exact opposite effect. I don't feel like I've had enough. I feel like I want to watch more. There's this strange momentum to his content that makes it very hard to simply watch one video and stop there, because the experience itself feels so deliberately built to keep your attention moving forward. And the more I think about that, the more it feels like Yahtzee tapped into something very specific that most creators never really managed to replicate. Because it's not just that he's funny, or critical, or fast-paced on his own, it's the way all those things combine into something that feels almost impossible to look away from once it starts. His videos don't really invite passive watching, they grab your attention almost immediately, keep pushing forward before you can fully settle, and somehow that makes criticism feel entertaining in a way that feels oddly addictive. And that's why I keep coming back, because the more I watch Yahtzee, the less it feels like I'm just watching reviews, and the more it feels like I'm watching someone who figured out how to turn critique itself into entertainment.
And imagine my annoyance day after day, opening the one remaining door that a boiler room could possibly go, and randomly drawing bunk room conservatory sex dungeon. Fuck me! No, not literally. Start again. I suppose the game wouldn't have that absorbing just one more day quality if we weren't rubbing up against a certain amount of random chance. That's how they get you, isn't it? You don't keep pulling on a slot machine lever because it's good elbow exercise. Little bit scummy, yes, but it's a little bit scummy to make me perform sexual favours by bribing me with chocolate. I'll feel dirty while I'm doing it, but I still get some tasty chocolate afterwards. What the fuck am I on about?
What makes Yahtzee even more interesting is that he somehow managed to make criticism itself feel entertaining enough to stand on its own. Because a lot of reviews, even good ones, are still fundamentally built around information. They're there to tell you whether something worked, what didn't, and why. But Yahtzee's videos rarely feel like they're simply trying to inform you in that straightforward way. They feel like comedy performances disguised as reviews, where the criticism is important, but the entertainment value of how that criticism is delivered becomes just as much of the appeal. His observations don't just land because they're insightful, they land because they're phrased in ways that are funny, exaggerated, cutting, and often so absurdly specific that they become memorable long after the video is finished. And that's a huge part as to why his content stays watchable even when you have no personal investment in the game he's talking about. Because there are plenty of Yahtzee videos people will watch without ever touching the game being reviewed, simply because the entertainment doesn't rely entirely on caring about the subject itself. That's actually a very rare skill, because most reviewers are still somewhat dependent on the audience caring about the product they're discussing, but Yahtzee often feels bigger than that. The game becomes material, something for him to bounce off of, dissect, exaggerate, and turn into something entertaining through his writing and delivery. And because of that, the videos stop feeling like content about a game and start more feeling like a Yahtzee video first and foremost, which is a huge difference. And what makes his criticisms hit even harder is that underneath all of the jokes, there's usually a very clear point holding everything together. That's what separates him from people who simply rant for entertainment. Yahtzee can be absurd, hyperbolic, and brutally sarcastic, but most of the time there's still a structure underneath it. There's still a real observation buried beneath the comedy, which gives the videos a sense of substance rather than just chaos. And because of that, the jokes don't feel disposable, they reinforce the criticism of distracting from it. That creates a very specific kind of watchability where you're laughing, listening, and processing his actual points at the same time, which makes the experience feel far more engaging than the standard review ever could.
The way the camera zooms in and shows the victim's bones as they splinter like dry twigs is exactly the same way one would film a cum shot. It's not pleasant. Not that I can't handle a bit of gore, but it gives me the same feeling I get from watching midget on giraffe porn. A sense of, I'm certainly not getting off to this, but I know someone in the world is, and that's what makes me uncomfortable.
One of the biggest reasons Yahtzee is so difficult to stop watching is because his videos almost never give your brain a chance to disengage. The moment one starts, there's this immediate sense of momentum, rapid fire narration, jokes landing one after the other, observations stacked so tightly together that by the time you've processed one punchline, he's already halfway through the next one. And on paper, that kind of pacing should probably feel exhausting. It should feel overwhelming, maybe even irritating after a while, like the kind of thing that burns bright for a few minutes before becoming too much to comfortably sit through. But somehow, in Yahtzee's case, it has managed to create the opposite effect almost entirely. Instead of making me want to slow things down, it creates this constant sense of forward motion where my attention is always being pulled ahead, always waiting for the next comparison, the next joke, the next absurd metaphor, the next sudden shift in tone. The videos don't really pause long enough for boredom to settle in. They create this strangely addictive rhythm where stopping starts to feel less natural than simply letting the next video play. And what makes that pacing so effective is that it never feels random or uncontrolled. A lot of fast-talking creators can come across like they're simply speaking quickly for the sake of sounding energetic, almost like speed itself is doing the heavy lifting. But Yahtzee's pacing feels much more deliberate than that. Every sentence feels like it was written to build into the next one. Every joke feels placed with rhythm. Every rant feels like it's moving forward towards something rather than simply spiraling into noise for the sake of chaos. And because of that, the speed stops feeling chaotic and starts feeling almost musical in a weird way. Like his videos have their own internal tempo that you unconsciously settle into once they begin. You're not just listening to someone review a game, you're listening to a performance built around timing, escalation, and delivery, where the speed itself becomes part of the entertainment rather than simply a stylistic gimmick. And once you lock into that rhythm, it becomes surprisingly difficult to step away from it because the entire experience is constantly pushing forward in a way that keeps your brain engaged. That pacing also creates something a lot of creators struggle to achieve, which is genuine rewatchability. Because Yahtzee's videos are often so dense with jokes, comparisons, side remarks, and throwaway lines that it's almost impossible to fully catch everything on a first watch. A joke that flew past too quickly suddenly lands on a rewatch. A phrase you barely processed becomes one of the funniest parts of the video every single time you watch it. An absurd comparison that got buried under the speed suddenly stands out in a way it didn't before, and that density makes his content feel richer than a lot of traditional review videos, because there's always this sense that another clever line or hidden joke is tucked somewhere in the flow waiting to be captured. That means his speed doesn't just make the videos entertaining in the moment, it makes them feel worth revisiting, which is a huge part of why people don't just simply watch Yahtzee once and move on. They watch, rewatch, quote lines, remember comparisons, and keep coming back because the pacing itself creates an experience that feels rewarding beyond a single viewing. And maybe that's what makes his speed so deceptively powerful and memorable, because it isn't just there to make the videos feel fast in a surface level sense, it changes the way the content itself is experienced. It creates anticipation, it creates momentum, it creates a kind of attention lock where your brain is constantly being pushed forward before it has time to drift. And that is a very specific kind of entertainment design that most creators never really figure out how to pull off. A lot of people can talk quickly, a lot of people can make jokes, a lot of people can rant, but very few have managed to combine those things in a way that makes the speed itself become part of why the experience feels so compulsively watchable. With Yahtzee, it's not just that the videos move quickly, it's that they move in a way that makes stopping feel unnatural once they've started.
Man, great big airway obstructing bollocks to the Game Awards. Claire Obscure Game of the Year, fair enough, but best indie and best debut indie? A, it was made by ex-Ubisoft lads, so if that counts as a newcomer so does putting on a false moustache and running to the back of the line for another free sample at the Whole Foods. And B, a game made by one dude in a shed out of leftover pixels and crisp packets, that is an indie game. A game that commissioned all its character avatars from someone on DeviantArt who earns the bulk of their living drawing Snagglepuss fisting Winnie the Pooh. That is an indie game. The Game Awards badly need to acknowledge the middle ground between that and AAA. I know, I grew up in the Midlands, and I'm sick of explaining to people from London that there's actually a lot of England you have to get through before you're up north. We don't all eat black puddings or act in high fantasy HBO dramas.
But more than anything else, I think what really makes Yahtzee so hard to stop watching is that his style feels so incredibly specific to him. A lot of creators can imitate fast editing, sarcasm, criticism, but very few can replicate the exact balance Yahtzee has between cynicism, intelligence, absurdity, timing, and self-awareness. Because his videos don't just work because they're fast or funny, they work because they feel like they're coming from a very distinct personality that shapes every sentence. You can hear it in the way he phrases things, the way he manages to naturally escalate jokes, the way he suddenly pivots from a ridiculous comparison into a genuinely insightful criticism without ever losing momentum. It all feels like a part of a voice that is instantly recognizable, which is something most creators spend years trying to develop and never fully achieve. And I think that personality is what makes his content feel so addictive beyond the technical pacing or comedy structure. Because once you become familiar with Yahtzee's style, there's this weird comfort in it. You know what kind of energy you're about to dive into, but you don't know exactly how he's going to express it in this particular video. There is a level of familiarity, but there's still unpredictability inside that familiarity, which of course keeps the videos from feeling repetitive even after years, or even a decade now, of watching them. You're not simply clicking because you want a review of a game that you might be interested in down the line. You're clicking because you want his version of that review, his phrasing, his perspective, his way of tearing something apart or unexpectedly praising it in a way nobody else quite could. And that's usually a sign of a creator who has moved beyond simply making content and started building something much more difficult to replicate. A style people like myself have actively come back to on its own. The games matter, the criticisms matter, the jokes matter, but at a certain point, Yahtzee himself becomes the reason people keep watching. And once that happens, the videos stop feeling like isolated pieces of content and start feeling like a part of a much bigger experience built around a personality people have become genuinely attached to. That's a very hard thing to create, and that's probably one of the biggest reasons his videos still feel so compulsively watchable all these years later.
Let me just transcribe my thought process at the time. Dum-de-dum, well this isn't very scary. Oh look, physics, I can throw chairs around like a removal man who's completely stopped giving a shit. Doors suddenly blowing open in the wind, yawn-a-rama, guess I'll just look around upstairs and then might as well play Halo Reach for a bit. Nope, nothing much up here either. I'll just go back and... whoa, what was that thing I just glimpsed running down a hallway? I don't know, but it looked cross about something, so I think I'll go down this other hallway instead. Oh, it's blocked. Guess I'll turn around and... where did you come from? Run, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mess your chairs up. Oh, pissing blimey, there's jam coming out of the walls!
What makes Yahtzee Croshaw so difficult to stop watching isn't just that he's funny, fast, or critical on his own, it's the way all of these things work together to create something that feels constantly engaging from the very beginning till the very end. The pacing keeps your attention moving, the comedy makes the criticism entertaining, and the personality behind it all gives the video a voice that feels instantly recognizable and incredibly difficult to replace. Watching Yahtzee rarely feels passive, because his videos are built in a way that constantly keeps your brain engaged, always waiting for the next joke, the next observation, the next absurd comparison, or the next point buried underneath it all. And maybe that's ultimately why his videos feel so strangely addictive a decade later, because at some point you have stopped clicking purely for the games he's reviewing and you start clicking because you want to experience his version of that review. The writing, the pacing, the criticism, the delivery. It all combines into something that feels less like a traditional review format and more like a performance you can't really step away from once it starts. And that's probably the real reason Yahtzee Croshaw becomes so hard to stop watching, because he didn't just figure out how to review games, he figured out how to make criticism itself feel endlessly entertaining.